right, here we go. It's week number 3, I don't even know what we would call it, episode 4 or 5.
So many episodes.
We did the previews shows and all that stuff, but week 3 of the season starts up. We are digging for wisdom. That's Matt Diggs, the good professor. I'm Ward. You can call me Wizzy if you see me, or at least just talk to me because I like to chop it up. I like to chop it up at games about Dallas Fort Worth football because it's so interesting. I mean, the good thing about last week, both of us were in agreement that we thought Highland Park was going to lose. They didn't lose. They held down home field advantage. And we don't feel terrible about being wrong because people know we're making educated thoughts and guesses on what we thought happened. And that's just the wonderment of Texas high school football. Things are going to happen that you don't expect. So, I mean, I see you over there smiling. I'm not all, oh man, we said we were going to win by 17 and they lost by 3. So
I'm not smiling. I'm just thinking now you've pulled out 2 weeks of clips over our last 2 weeks now. And these clips, I did couch it a little bit. I'm like, well, if this, then this, it was a great sales job to where I could probably justify it in hindsight. But obviously the main point of those 2 clips were that DeSoto was going to have to play a competitive game against Allen, and that that other team that Lewis was going to roll. I see. I've already forgot about Louisville. I'm so mad at them. I just don't just fire. They're going in the 8-6A fire bin. We're just firing everybody there. And so much came out of that game. And really now, I think Highland Park is a legitimate state championship contender because they are definitely going Division II. And the way Division II works out, they're going to have a very tough second round game against either McKinney or Denton Guyer. But after that, then you're looking at DeSoto. And do you ever really want to bet if Randy Allen makes it to a DeSoto game? Do you really want to bet against Randy Allen to figure out DeSoto and figure out a way to stop him with the tools that he's got? I mean, Lake Highlands is a legitimate state championship contender now. And watching them against, and I always joke about this, that I see them scrimmage against Plano East every single year, and they look good, but Plano East looks like they're about the same kind of team that Highland Park is, and all of a sudden Highland Park is a state championship contender and Plano East wins one game, and I'm just like, what happened in that 16 to 17 weeks? But Randy Allen has got such a tight grip over that program, and he understands it. And I'm going to let you couch it, but you sent me a text message that was very, I think, foretelling this past week.
Well, I don't really want to do this because it looks good on Pat Doney, and that kind of stuff gets his head big as heck. But I was driving to my game, and Pat called me up, and he was like, what do you think about the game I'm at? Because he was at Louisville Highland Park, and I said, I think Louisville by 14 to 17, somewhere in that range. He said, I don't think it's going to be close, because he went and did pregame stuff with both teams, and Randy Allen, very candidly said, I am pleasantly surprised about this team. They are better than I thought they were after week 1. You don't hear that from Randy Allen. He knows what his teams are when he goes into the game, and he knows what he's going to do with his teams going into a season. And he said coming out of week 1, man, I am really surprised at how good this team is. And he smiled. And you don't see him smiling that all too terribly much. He put on a smile, dare I say, and said his team, and he's excited about this team. And it's like we said in our pre-stuff. I mean, we were always talking about how Randy Allen's 1 foot out the door. Well, he'd be both feet out if he thought his team wasn't going to be good. And he's both feet in, and they showed it. They got that early lead and held it down and hold on to that home Highlander Stadium advantage that they have there. So it was very impressive. I hate to give Pat the credit because I'll never hear the end of it, but he heard that, and that's what he said. So that was a while.
Once I got that text message, I was getting worried. I was like, oh boy. Yeah. Because you never hear that. I mean, that like you said, you never hear that out of Randy Allen. He's always looking for that, we got to get better. He's always coach speak, and the way it came across, the tone I read it was, he was giddy. He's excited. Yeah. Like, he's excited about this team. He's excited to coach. Almost kind of reminds me of Coach Buchanan, right before he retired, kind of knowing I got something special. And if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out with a bang on top and have fun. And I'm not saying that, Highland Park is going to ride off into the sunset with the state championship, but that'd be kind of a nice fairy tale ending as far as that goes.
Yeah, and another mistake I'm about to make is I'm going to give you credit. In the clip I did pull off, you did say the thing that rang in my ears. You said because Duncanville would and DeSoto would, and you're right. Those teams would have went in there and did what they had to do against Highland Park, because that's where they are as far as 6A football. And Louisville is still at that point where they're, Coach Otis probably this week saying, okay, we may not be at that point yet, but we can work on it and maybe be there after week 10.
I think he has to hope on that, but I think they have to do a lot of soul searching. When you really dig into that box score and you really look at it at a granular level and you talk to some of the fans, there was a lot of questionable play calling as far as Louisville being, a team you really run behind. That offensive line might be the strength of their team, and you really didn't see them piecing together those 5, 6, 7 straight runs. And again, this is the time you can try to work things out, but I don't know if you really want to tinker in a statement game like that. But I mean, Coach Odell might be looking at it as a tinkering process still and minimizing the impact of just one game. Obviously, I think if Louisville can, settle things down, I still don't see them, competing with a Duncanville or DeSoto, depending on how things go, because the way 6A is shaking out, there's at least a mathematical possibility that Louisville might go Division II. And again, that gets back down there with Highland Park and Denton Guyer and DeSoto. And Division II is not much easier this year. And even South Lake Carroll is looking like more of a Division II team. But I think Louisville definitely has a lot of, really growth. Who are they? They have to figure out their identity. Highland Park knew exactly who their identity was. They strapped it out with Warren Peck and they excelled. And Louisville, I think they had a lot of questions.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking about it as we're sitting down to record the show this past week, and I was looking over the rundown, and I was like, man, my first 3 games are just fabulous games and introduced us to quarterbacks that we didn't really know about. Warren Peck, you just talked about at Highland Park. Obviously, Alito ends up beating Guyer in what could be the game of the year so far, but it introduced us to Logan McLaughlin, who threw such great deep balls. If you saw those deep balls, they were just a thing of art and well placed, and that game went right back and forth. And then the third game was the Mansfield Summit. And that's another one I was going to question you on, because after the first half, because I was like, man, you think about Mansfield teams and most of Mansfield ISD, except for maybe Lake Ridge, you think about those teams and it's always a running powered offense. Mansfield was good. They had Saeed Adebo and they had Stephen Taylor running the ball and all that, but you never thought about a quarterback that could really air it out. First half was showing me the same thing. And then out of nowhere, Van Cleve came crazy in the second half and was just throwing with pinpoint accuracy all over the place. And he took some hits. Boy, they hit him hard in the first half, the Summit defense. And he still got up and led them back. And then they lost the lead. He brought them back, lost the lead again, brought them back again. So 3 banger games, introduced us to 3 new quarterbacks. I mean, you had to like what you saw last week as far as just quality of games.
Well, you might be seeing quality games. Yeah, I was doing the math this week, and I've been to 6 games. The average margin of my 6 games is 31 points, and Plano East is actually bringing the margin down a little bit, and they've had 2 blowout wins. And just the average. I go see Gunter and Walnut Grove, not knowing what I'm going to see, and I see a 40-point blowout. And Rockwall and Cedar Hill, that was a blowout, and Toller and Peaster, that was a blowout. So I find, and the best game was College Station Lovejoy of the 6 I've seen, and that game was even Lovejoy pretty much blew them out. College Station got a couple of late window dressing touchdowns, but across the area, I'm just picking the wrong games. Apparently, you're right. And just a quick hitter on that Mansfield game. A lot of people are looking at Summit and thinking, well, Summit lost to Mansfield. What does that say about them? They're punching up 2 divisions when they're playing that game, and I think that speaks more to Mansfield and how good they are. Now, obviously, there's a big gap between Mansfield and DeSoto and Duncanville, but I think they're extending the gap between them and Waxahachie or Cedar Hill for that 3rd spot. And if they get good, I mean, that they go 3-4 deep. I remember you talking about in a couple of our shows that Mansfield really wanted that rematch against DeSoto last year. They just didn't have the injuries, and they thought that if they had a second game and they were healed up, they could have given them a good game. So if they can stay, and that's kind of been Mansfield's knock, if they can stay healthy, keep their frontline players good, they're top 15, top 12 kind of a team. And if they have the right kind of a game and maybe get a couple of things go their way, they're a team that can be very dangerous.
Yeah, I didn't walk away from that game, like you said, sour on Summit, because I thought Summit played a hell of a first half. Second half, they were bit because Mansfield scored, and then the kickoff is one of those short kickoffs that bounces backwards, and it catches your return man in his tracks, and Mansfield kind of converged on the ball and got it and scored right away, and all of a sudden the momentum changes hit. But one thing I did see, which I didn't realize, I don't know if you brought it up or not, is that Summit's using 2 quarterbacks as well. And they got a quarterback in there, the guy that did well, which is Demarius Bird. They both did well, but he went for 3 series, and then they went back and forth between another guy. And I was like, uh-oh, I don't know if Diggs needs to see this Summit team quite yet until we either figure out who the starter is full ways or if he's ready to go off after him for having 2 QBs. But they did have 2. Look, we got district play starting for some teams this week, so we're going to change it up, the format this week, and start talking about districts and some of the games that are going to be happening with teams in the district. And you brought up Lovejoy. Lovejoy's taking on North Crowley. I mean, right off the bat, that's our game of the week. We didn't know what to expect from it last year because we were still getting introduced to North Crowley. We know what North Crowley is now. We know what Lovejoy is now. Man, to me, this game seems like a game that it's whoever makes a stop in that fourth quarter may come out on top.
Yeah, it can really go either way, because when you look at the knock on Lovejoy over the last couple of years, when they play a team like South Oak Cliff, when they even played last year, played North Crowley, even when they played Melissa at times, they have a hard, when it almost kind of reminds me of Coppell at times. When they are good, they are great, and they can fly high and they look beautiful and the offense is going. But when it starts to bog down a little bit, when you start getting hit in the mouth and that doesn't work, and you have to deal with press coverage, and you have athletes who can stay with you, and your 3 receivers are not just running down, uncovered, and you actually have to make contested catches. And now with Parker Livingstone, he was in a boot at the end of that game, although I heard some positive things that it might just be more precautionary. We still don't know about him, but obviously they still have a couple of really good receivers over there at Lovejoy nonetheless. I think this is a test for both teams, because this is going to be the first time that North Crowley has had an efficient, well-coached offense going against that defense, and how well will that defense handle up? When you're playing Arlington, Sam Houston, and Arlington, the 8-6A, we've already kind of said, that's a district we're a little bit sour on right now. And now they're playing their first team, so this is their first real good test. This is also, I think, Lovejoy's first test, not necessarily because College Station and Argyle are not good teams, but this is their state championship test. That we kind of gave Louisville that moniker that this is their state championship test against Highland Park, and we want style points on top of that. For Lovejoy, they can lose this game and I still think have a good state championship test, because again, we're punching up two divisions, kind of like Summit did against Mansfield last week. So I expect North Crowley to win this game, but I'm looking for a couple of things from Lovejoy. The physicality of the offensive line versus the defensive line battles on both sides. Are they going to be able to compete in the trenches with North Crowley, get hit, and be able to get back up? How are you going to resolve after a couple of turnovers? Because North Crowley has the kind of playmakers who will steal a interception on you, who will force a fumble despite your best intentions on that. And then finishing, in the fourth quarter and having to play a 48-minute game. Can they play a complete 48-minute game with their top line players? Because a lot of times last year they're subbing in, and I almost remember that Argyle game last year. They start out so fast, it was like 42-42 at halftime or whatever it was, and then in the second half it really bogged down, and I think both teams just got completely gassed and completely exhausted. So does Lovejoy have that 48-minute thing? And that is a big thing, because you saw that with Rockwall this past week. That Rockwall got out on the big lead against Jesuit and didn't have that 48-minute ability to play at a high level with the first team that long, because they're subbing so much and rotating and doing that. And when you have to get your top players in there for 48 minutes, do they have the constitution to do this? I think it's going to be a lower scoring game than we expect, because Lovejoy's defense is a little bit underrated. But I think, and again, there's like 2 levels of what we consider a low scoring game. Some people, if I call this game a 35-28 game, they're going to say, well, that's not low scoring. Go look at Rockwall Jesuit, go look at Denton Guy Early. Those are some high scoring games. I don't think we're going to get to that level, but I think North Crowley will win a 35-28 kind of a game. That will speak well in a loss to their ability to compete with South Oak Cliff and Mansfield Summit. Now, if we see a final that's like 42-7 or something, then again, I think it's time to tap the brakes, and it speaks very well to North Crowley and their ability to have a dominant run this year.
Yeah, North Crowley's, like you said, the defense is finally going to have a little competition. They beat their first 2 opponents with 8 touchdowns each game, so they could take a playoff or 2, and then thinking it's amazing what a year makes, because you think about last year and Lovejoy losing North Crowley, and most of us were disappointed in seeing that because we didn't know what North Crowley was. And it's a testament to how Ray Gates has got this program going, because now you're talking about if Lovejoy loses, as long as they don't lose bad. Well, last year they didn't lose bad. They lost 28-20. And we still kind of felt bad about them, and they lost that one on the road. But it's like you said, it's no dig on Lovejoy. It's just the way North Crowley's got that program going. They're a legitimate 6A squad playing powerful 6A games, and they're going to need that because this district play starts the following week for them. And some of these teams in district have really caught my eye. I know Crowley has caught my eye, but boy, Boswell has really caught my eye. I mean, the points they're scoring, they're averaging over 60 a game in the first two games. They're not playing world beaters, but when you lose your coach, it's you think that you have to take a little bit of a step back. But Boswell's really playing some good football. I almost said basketball.
Well, they maybe playing some good basketball too. Sawyer Farr it wasn't on the team anymore. It's like Parker Polk. We just expect him to be there forever, and they've done nothing but just continue to step up and have a great offensive performances with the quarterback, the running back game. They look really, really good. And I'm starting to see a split in District 3 6A. I'm starting to see that gap between the top four and the contenders of LD Bell and Weatherford, who are going to have to play above their pay grade a lot better than they have this past couple of weeks. Especially LD Bell is 2-0, but they're less impressive in this 2-0 than they were last year in their 2-0. And then we got Weatherford that they looked good against Keller Central, and then all of a sudden they get hit in the mouth by Richardson Pierce, and we start to wonder about them. I still like Euless Trinity. I still think Euless Trinity right there is a good team to keep an eye on. But Boswell is that team that, they haven't played anybody yet. So they have to have one of those meaningful games in a meaningful moment to really catch my eye. But if you got to play the schedule that's in front of you. And I like that they're playing that schedule in impressive ways. Lake Ridge, they beat them, so impressively this past year. And I think that speaks to their ability to compete at a high level in this district.
Yeah, and they got Holtum this week, so I don't know how much of a challenge that's going to get them, but we'll see once district play starts. That should be an interesting vibe there. And boy, I'd love to see LD Bell challenge for that. But I mean, where are you talked about them a little bit. Where are we putting them right now? They haven't been impressive in their wins. We both said they should be able to at least challenge for that playoff spot, but man, I feel like backing off a little bit.
I think right now I probably have them 5-6 in that district, and I'm very concerned about them just because they have no offense. They got 6 turnovers against Irving MacArthur and only still managed 13 points or 16 points. They had 3 field goals and a touchdown and like 150 yards. And when you go +5 on the turnover battle and you're playing, and we're talking about Woodrow Wilson the week before scored 5 touchdowns against Irving MacArthur. So that really speaks to what I would consider an offensive ineptitude. And one thing I really want to highlight, you kind of downplayed Holtum a little bit, and for all the right reasons, but Holtum has been good in their losses. I mean, they played Richland to the fight. They were throwing in the end zone to potentially win that game. That game against Everman the week before, I thought the score was a little bit closer than I expected. And then you see Stephenville beat Stephenville beat Everman, which kind of calibrates them to not as significantly. Their offense looks pretty good right now. So Holtum could give a little bit of a test to Boswell. It's going to be one of those games that if Boswell wins, 56-35 or something, we're still going to speak well of Boswell and say, hey, they're looking really good. But Holtum is going to be competitive in these games, and I'm really excited about watching their growth this year so far because they're sneaky good. They're sneaky good in a bad way. I don't see them making the playoffs in 4-6A, right. But they're going to be more competitive. And if you mess around and overlook them, they have the talent to overcome a poor performance on their opponent's part.
Yeah, and I watched some of their highlights last night, and what I noticed was they play physical too, which is you go into a game against Holtum and you think you have something going there, all of a sudden you get popped in the mouth, and you say, okay, we got to wake up and play some ball here because they're out here to play. Let's move on to 4A. Timber Creek's got a nice battle with Capel. We're going to have cameras at that game. It's kind of to see where these two teams are. Wouldn't you say it's one of those type games?
I think when we're looking at Timber, I wish we were talking about 4A, Ward. You kind of teased me there. Ward's going to go off script, and we're going to start talking about Panther Creek, and we're going to get into Anna and Salina. And I saw very earlier in the show, you called it the DFW, or you don't like calling it North Texas, but you don't want to talk about Decatur. You don't want to go out at your circle.
I do like talking about Decatur. It's just a little bit of a journey for me now that we're not doing the country roads.
The country roads are always open in our heart. But you are right. This is a proving ground game for both Timber Creek and Coppell. And, Timber Creek, obviously, with Dozie, our guy, Dozie Izukanma, Anderson Lewis, they got to figure out a lot of, on one hand, you can say they have good quarterback depth and they have good running back depth, but I always look at, you got to have that one player in there. And Coppell, man, Coppell is a team that is a head scratcher because they're going to make everybody look good, but their offense is really, really good. Coppell kind of reminds me of Lovejoy 3 years ago, as they're trying to figure out that identity. They're just going to have to outscore everybody. Edward Griffin is one of those quarterbacks. You mentioned the 3 quarterbacks at the start of the show that obviously were impressive. Edward Griffin, his first 2 weeks is very impressive. And what I'm most impressed by is his efficiency. He is not throwing incomplete passes. He went 20 for 23 this past week against South Grand Prairie, and South Grand Prairie has a really good defense. So that tells me that he is reading the game very well. He's not looking to force the ball down the field. He's not making mistakes, and he's using his multiplicity of receivers to his benefit. Luco Grossoli and Baron Tipton are there, but what Coppell cannot do is they can't run the ball very well. I saw them making an intentional effort. I think their coach was watching our podcast and saying, we can't run the ball, Diggs. We're going to run the ball 40 times this past week. And even in doing that, Xavier Mosley had a nice game, but he didn't have the kind of game where, you would expect, a good running powerhouse. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they're giving up 8 yards a run to a South Grand Prairie team that's not known for running the ball. And they did it against Saxe, and it's what kept them in the game. And if a team can consistently get 8 to 10 yards running the ball against you, they're just going to keep hammering it down your throat, and they're going to stay in the game. So Timber Creek, I think, is going to stay in this game because of Coppell's defensive inefficiencies. But I think Coppell is going to find a way to win in the same format that they found a way to win against Saxe, and then last week against South Grand Prairie. I think they're going to find a way to win this game. But it's one of those things, they're going to be playing everybody close. You're going to see a Coppell Plano West game, that's 52-45 with Plano West sticking in it, because Coppell is going to have to be perfect in offense. And the first time they have a couple of turnovers in a game, you could see them get upset in a game they're not supposed to lose. But I expect them to handle Timber Creek in a very competitive, very close game. If they do those things I talk about, you got to avoid the turnovers, you got to avoid the special teams errors. But so far, they've been very efficient in doing that.
The rest of the districts has some interesting games, but the one that kind of sticks out is South Lake heading out to Cedar Hill. You try to put Cedar Hill's trying desperately to get back on the map after destroying Martin, but me and you still have the taste of Rockwall doing whatever they want, and I think we both think South Lake may be probably better than Rockwall. So who knows? Even though that's on the road,
maybe you think South Lake is maybe better than Rockwall.
Even though that's on the road, even though that's on the road, Graham Knowles and them should probably not have much problem, have a field day out there in Longhorn land.
Cedar Hill is one of those teams that I'm just looking at and going, what is Cedar Hill? And props to Nick Ward and that coaching staff for building them back up, because even if Arlington Martin is worse than we expected and is down, that's a team that has a lot of
worse than we expected. That's for sure. They're definitely worse than we expected. Go ahead.
They are down and a little bit worse than we expected. But Cedar Hill got up for that and they dominated them. So that shows me that they are very well coached over there. And they took a setback. They got hit in the face, and those coaches coached them up and said, "We're going on to the next week. We're going to move on. We can make the playoffs. I believe in you." And he is instilling that sense of belief in them. Obviously, these 3 games that they're playing against Rockwall, Cedar Hill, and Arlington Martin, they're not Arlington Martin, South Lake Carroll, and Rockwall. They're testing themselves, and they're testing themselves because a couple of years ago they're looking at this district and going to Soto Duncanville. We got to get ready for those guys, so we have to play ourselves. And now that they're a mid-range team, those games don't look quite as appropriate. But then they got one. They got a win over in Arlington Martin, and they did it with defense. Holding Arlington Martin to 73 yards is something you just don't see it. And yeah, that could be Arlington Martin bad offense, but at the same time, they got 430 yards against that defense that shut down Lake Travis for 3 quarters. So they showed the ability to get that running game going. I think that's what Cedar Hill's going to have to do to keep this game competitive, is they're going to have to compress the game by getting the running game 7-8 minute drives. Let's keep it to 3-4 possessions and a half. And still Southlake is probably going to win. They're still going to probably be perfect in those 3 or 4 possessions they get. But that's how they're going to keep that game competitive. I think Southlake will win a 56-7 kind of game.
Yeah. And man, you'd love to see somebody win a 56-7 type game in the Allen Martin game, but I just don't know where the points can come from. It'd probably come on the Allen side. I just don't. I mean, Martin's got to be, the fans got to have their pulling their hairs out. They're not scoring. They got a new coach. It's just it's a difficult game to go to because both teams are underperforming. I think last week you said CE King probably would be favored in the Allen game. I said CE King would win that game. They did win the game. And now Allen's sitting at 0-2, Martin's sitting at 0-2. I'm not going to go in the history books and figure out when that's happened before, but what do you think about this game? I think you gave it a nice little slogan there for this game, right?
I call it the disappointment bowl in our rundown of those games. But Arlington Martin has so many head scratching questions we have to answer right now. And I was telling my kids, I'm trying to teach them the history of Plano East, and this is me working it always back to Plano East. And I've never seen, at least in their lifetime, where Plano East has started 2-0 and Allen hasn't been, or has been 0-2. So we're at least looking at that kind of history, that Allen hasn't started 0-2, at least in this 20 to 23 year period where they've started playing the 6A teams. But looking at just the matchups of this game, I look at what Allen has done, and they got Brady Bricker. He's a very good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, but he's efficient. And then Amir McDowell, he's not what Kavian Sibley was, but he's obviously going to be good enough, I think, to put yards on the board. And I mean, they had good offensive success against CE King. They just couldn't stop them. And if Arlington Martin can't have any sort of offensive consistency, I think Allen's going to win, 28-7, 28-3 kind of a game, maybe even get up to 35. I think that's kind of sad that we're thinking to ourselves, maybe Allen gets up to 35 points in the game finally, but they're going to have to play all 48 minutes to get there. But we know Arlington Martin at times has a good defense, but against Cedar Hill, it didn't come out there because maybe they have a good pass defense, but the run defense is a little bit questionable. We don't know what happened in that Lake Travis game. Obviously, it was a little bit of an anomaly. We saw a lot of anomalies this past week, but I think Allen should win this game pretty comfortably. But again, there have been so many head-scratching results. The beauty of high school football, it's a rich tapestry of amazing things. You could have, for all we know, Cedar Hill could have had, their quarterback got his heart broke against Rockwall and just wasn't playing anywhere near what we thought he was. He, dusted the dust off and got back into it and had an amazing game. And you see that a lot in high school football, a lot of ebbs and flows. And I think that we're going to see Allen. And so it's not impossible to think that Arlington Martin can win this game. Obviously, they're a very proud program, and maybe something that's happened there the last couple of weeks, and they get back into things. Maybe Brooks Brygance is the answer, and they got him in there at quarterback and found some things out with him. And they're going to really push it against Allen. But I think Allen, very comfortable win against Arlington Martin. But again, the thing that's going to cure Arlington Martin is getting in that District 8 6A where they're going to be significantly better than a lot of those teams. And that could get them healed up real quickly once they get that little bit of taste of victory in their mouth.
Well, it's interesting you said healed up, because a team that needs to get healed up is McKinney, literally, because they have 2 of their stars, as we talked about, hurting, and they got a game against Flower Mound. Boy, we're giddy about Flower Mound up here, Diggs. I know it takes you a while to get here, but when we score 34, and I say we just because my kids go there, but when we scored 34 against Lake Highlands in the first half, week 1, it was Jake Watson with his arm. He did it with his legs this time with 4 touchdowns and over 100 yards, a couple 100 yards rushers. How about this game, Diggs? I want to hear you tell me that Flower Mound is going to pull off the upset and win at McKinney. Tell it to me. We're listening. Hello?
Upset pick of the week.
My man.
Not going to be game, unfortunately, for you. But I do think that Flower Mound is going to be impressive in their loss. And Flower Mound has continued to impress me because they are so efficient and they are so well coached. And we keep talking about that. It's what I keep coming back to. I think they are an underrated model because they haven't had these huge wins. I don't think they've maybe ever won a playoff game. And they've had, they've had a lot of ineptitude in there, but they are so well coached and they get the best out of their talent to where if they ever get a few players and we're seeing this start to develop, that they could be a very dangerous team. I think McKinney is going to have to watch out. Can Flower Mound play this level of football against an above average or an elite defense? Because that's all McKinney has at this point. Their defense is what is holding this team together, because the offense, you look at their stat line, they're throwing 6-7 running backs out there. You got God's power. You got the 2 quarterback system, and a lot of players you just don't know who are contributing a little bit here and a little bit there. And it's their defense who is setting up these very short yardage situations because their defense is so good. So can Flower Mound do this against an elite level defense? Because in 6-6A, there are not many great defenses. I'm already thinking of Flower Mound and Coppell, that matchup. Coppell's not going to be able to shut down Flower Mound the way they are running the ball. I mean, I think Flower Mound might be considered a favorite against Coppell if they played right now. And I'm considering that in my rankings as I'm looking at Flower Mound and looking at Coppell and what they're doing well. And Flower Mound is playing such executing good football. Jake Watson, as you talked about, 2 straight great games. Peyton Stadler came in at running back and was really a second option for Flower Mound against Lake Highlands. And when I was really breaking down that Lake Highlands game, it wasn't like they Deontay Dean had a great game. He had 180 yards rushing. Trip Hawley had a very effective game passing the ball. Flower Mound was just that good. And that's what's so scary about this is what is their ceiling? And now they're about to hit up against the top 10 DFW area team. We're going to get a little bit of insight into that ceiling. Could they upset them? I think it's absolutely a possibility. But I think McKinney is probably a 14-point favorite. I've seen some of the computer polls have this as a 30, 40-point kind of a game. I don't think we're going to see that at all.
No, sir. Coach Basil won't let that happen. I'll talk more about this next week in the open week, see if you can think they can squeeze their way into a playoff spot. But let's talk a little bit more about the 6A, because you got your Plano East squad going out there to Rock Hill. Talk to me about that game, what you think. I know we've only dabbled into Plano East a little bit so far, but let me hear what you think about that one.
We should always dabble into Plano East, Ward. I mean, you have podcast listeners who are demanding more Plano East talk because they understand the greatness that we're seeing at Plano East right now. I'm a little skeptical of Plano East in my heart of hearts. Obviously, I'm a fan first and foremost. But again, we talk about it's very much like the Boswell situation. You got to win a game that matters. And Plano East has not won a game that matters in 5 years. So you got to win a game that matters. It's nice that you're a non-district superstar. You go through your non-district 3-0 and putting up video game like numbers and fixing a lot of the inefficiencies, but you got to play Plano. You got to play Plano and beat them in your homecoming. You got to beat Hebron. Then when you go 5-0, we can start talking about, can Plano East make a playoff run, or can Plano East win a playoff game, or can Plano East make the playoffs? Right now, it's just fun. It's fun. They're learning how to win. They're learning, and they are so well coached right now. And I said this on the dump. The best compliment I can give Plano East right now is they look like Flower Mound, and they're not, we don't got D1 players left and right all over the place. So we got a couple, but you're just seeing them play so flawless, and they're executing right now, and it's fun to watch. You're not just there shaking your head going, oh, why did that player do that? Or we have a missed tackle here, or why can't they tackle? Coach B has got them coached up, and they are playing at a very high level, and they're making the best of what they have. But Plano and Hebron and Coppell and Marcus, they're all going to have more talent than Plano East. So can Plano East beat a team with more talent than them? We're going to have to find that out. And Rock Hill, I think, is going to give them a test. Rock Hill doesn't have more talent than them, but Rock Hill is also like Flower Mound, to where they're going to get the best out of their talent. So can Plano East play against a team that is going to have a well-executed program that's going to be efficient and not make mistakes? Because they beat Rowlett, and Rowlett was making mistakes in the second half. Naaman Forest, they had a center who is basically airmailing every single snap and just creating all kinds of negative situations for Naaman Forest, to where, they have a couple good drives and all of a sudden they're 25 yards back because, they have a 30-yard snap on just a shotgun thing. And Perales, their quarterback, he was jumping every single time to catch the ball. I mean, it was an excessive level of snap issues there. So you're not going to see that at Rock Hill. So if I'm not saying Naaman Forest and Rowlett gave Plano East the game, but they made it easier for Plano East. Rock Hill's not going to make it easy for Plano East. So can Plano East make themselves look good when it's not made easy for them? And I think they're going to win this game. I think it could be 14 to 17 points, but still going to Prosper and winning a game, even going to Rock Hill, they're going to have to show that. Rock Hill got better last week and played Timber Creek very well. So we get a little 6A calibration here because we saw Timber Creek and we saw Rock Hill last week. Now we're going to see Coppell play Timber Creek and Plano East play Rock Hill. Maybe we'll get a little bit of insight into this district. Hebron, biggest head scratching loss last week.
Yeah, they got on top of them, and then that was it. I mean, they scored off the bat, and then they just couldn't score anymore. And Jagger Bale got that last second touchdown then to win it for Wiley. But you're right, that was a head scratcher. And where does that put them in the? I bring it back to Flower Mound. And maybe that's a team Flower Mound can jump over because Hebron seems inconsistent. And what do we say about their game coming up now? They're playing Eaton with a Division I quarterback out there in Noah Lugo.
Yeah, and trying to figure out Hebron, they have talent, and that's the thing I keep hearing about Hebron. Patrick Creighton Jr., their quarterback, I know that always makes you cringe when you start talking about former Cowboys. He left that game at some point. I don't know if it was an injury or if it was a decision from the coaching staff. Evan Enderlin came in and he played, he didn't have great success against Wiley's defense. It's kind of a running back by committee. Ison Jones, they have good receivers. Chase Harris stands out at Hebron, but Eaton has frontline studs who are out there performing each and every week, and they are playing well. I think of DeMarlon Williams. Ran the ball 15 times, 240 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Noah Lugo, no turnovers last week. Talon Holmes and Mason Stubbs had great games receiving the ball for Eaton. I think Eaton has a chance to make a statement against Hebron. They match up very well against them. The last couple of years that Hebron and Eaton has played, it's been a little bit of a head scratcher. It's like, it's almost like McKinney Boyd and Byron Nelson before Byron Nelson made the statement finally against McKinney Boyd and said, we're quitting playing around. We have arrived. We're going to beat everybody we played by 60 until we play Carroll. So we've arrived. But Hebron Eaton has gone back and forth the last 3 years. I think Eaton's going to win maybe a 42-21, 42-28 kind of a game against Hebron. And I think that's going to speak well to Eaton, but Hebron is a dangerous team, but they got to get it figured out. And last year I kept saying Hebron's got to get figured out until they played Plano East and figured it out. So can they figure it out a little bit earlier? We'll find out.
Well, let's move on to 7-6A. This guy here wants to know what you have to say about that district. Little Maddie Stafford wants to know because the marquee game we thought was going to be Highland Park and Lake Highlands. Lake Highlands kind of laid that egg against Flower Mound, so maybe the marquee game here is not even is Jesuit against Richardson Pierce, because Jesuit took down Rockwall. Pierce is winning games, and it's a nice Thursday night battle out there. We can see our girl Marley out there as they're going to be gunning the ball. I think that might be a high scoring game. Do you not think so?
I think it's going to be a fantastic game. And I lamented about this in our rankings, which you can see on our website. Check out our social media for that. I'll see if I can, remember it here. You have Richardson Pierce, they beat Wiley. You got Wiley, they beat Hebron. You got Jesuit. You've got Jesuit beat Rockwall, who beat Cedar Hill, who beat Arlington Martin. And you're just calibrating all of these things like what's going on here, because Pierce has, basically a transitive win now over Jesuit. And, you think to yourself, well, how is this going to work as far as who's going to win this game? Because Richardson Pierce is not a team we expected at all to be in the playoff mix. And now this is the first time that this district has 5 legitimate playoff contenders for the first time in a while, to where you could see Lake Highlands not make the playoffs. My darling team, Bertner, they might not make the playoffs. And this is Richardson Pierce's chance to introduce themselves to the district at a high level. I think, like you said, it is going to be a shootout. But what does Jesuit do with shootouts? They find a way to win because they're so conditioned. They understand how to play this kind of a game. Charlie Peters knows how, because Jesuit has been doing this for years. I mean, they get into these shootouts, kind of like Highland Park has done in the past, and they excel at that level. So you got Richardson Pierce, who's going to have to win in a shootout. I like Jesuit to be able to win in that shootout. Charlie Pierce had 379 yards and six touchdowns against Rockwall last week, but they don't have a running game. And that's something that is going to catch up with them at some point, very much like Coppell. You got to have a running game. But at the same time, if Charlie Peters can throw for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns against those middle tier teams every single week, I think they can, get as high as second. That's not going to work against Highland Park, but I think it will work against the rest of the district.
Yeah, that's the Jesuit. Definitely, since I've been here, has been known as a team that loves shootouts. If you got your 2 guns in your holster, they got one in their sock that they can pull out, one hidden behind them in their back pocket, and they'll just keep shooting and shooting until they get that victory. But the thing with Pierce is if they find a way, and it's not the biggest home field advantage in the world, but if they find a way to win at home. And if Berkner's team is still a little bit injured and not playing their starting quarterback when they play in the next week, well, after that is Nimitz, Irving, Richardson. I mean, they're in the playoffs if they win their next 2 games. So that's what they're going to be preaching to them in the locker room this week. Beat Jesuit, and you've got a good mark here to get into the postseason. Let's just go out and do this thing. But easier said than done, right, Diggsy? To beat a team like that can fire away.
It is, but when you look at the offensive weapons they've got, Presley Harper is playing really good at quarterback. Andrew Casagrande is playing really good at running back. So they're able to do that where Jesuit can't. They're able to get those tough yards. They're able to get those chunk plays on the ground. So it's going to be a fascinating styles make fights kind of a game. I think Jesuit has more bullets in the gun right now, and I think they're going to win a 49-42 game. And I'm going to tell you right now, this will be my Thursday night game of the week.
And who else likes a lot of touchdowns? Touchdown Teddy Madden. So he'll be there with you since it's right down the block from his house anyway. We're going to have all the stars out at this game. So 7-6A, you are here. You've got Diggsy there. You got Ted there. You've made it if that's the case. Let's move on to 8-6A as much as we're excited about 7-6A. That's how disappointed we are at 8-6A. Man, you pulled out the stat 2-12 so far, right? The teams in this district.
Yeah, 0-7 last week at 2-5 the week before. So
what is going on?
12 in non-district play, and just so many head scratchers in this district. And there's so much talent in this district. I was very high on Arlington Bowie. Had some questions about Arlington. I saw Lamar and thought to myself, Lamar, had a chance in this district. And more than ever now, I'm seeing this district is so compressed that, there is a legitimate, pathway where you might see Arlington Martin not make the playoffs, because it's not like they're just so much better than these other teams going into it. They've kind of regressed to the mean at this point, and the mean has kind of gotten a little bit lower as well. And it's like they keep trying to outdo themselves to lower that mean. That's a little psychology talk for you, a little social science talk. We're getting into some mean, median, and mode and whatnot. But one team I'm still consistently impressed with so far has been Arlington Bowie, despite their record, because of who they've played. And Arlington Bowie has played some higher end teams. They played Mesquite Horn last week. Mesquite Horn is a team I'm very high on. I think Arlington Bowie is going to get at least a third win for District 8-6A. I think they're going to get back on the board against Plano this week. But the rest of the district, I struggle to find out where they're going to get their wins at times. I'm just kind of going right down the list. You got Arlington against Fossil Ridge. I think Fossil Ridge might be a favorite in that game. We talked about Martin and Allen already. SGP Mansfield. I think the way Mansfield has been playing, hard to give SGP the edge there. Arlington Lamar against Keller Central. Keller Central has had 2 bad games against Waxahachie or against Weatherford and Plano now. Maybe we finally get to see Lamar give us a little bit something. I don't think Grand Prairie is going to be a favorite over Waxahachie. And Sam Houston against LD Bell. What LD Bell are we going to get? We've talked about that a few times. I think LD Bell will be a favorite over them. So the one win I think that Arlington Bowie, I think the one win I think 8-6A might definitely get is Arlington Bowie against Plano. And you were at that game last year, were you not? Or at least you had footage of that game with that Hail Mary at the end.
We had footage. I wasn't there, but I did see the footage of it, man. That was a fantastic finish. So, man,
It felt like you were there, Ward.
it felt like I was there. That's how great the finish was. I might pick Arlington over Fossil Ridge in that one. I got something but with Arlington. I just think they're going to snap through this thing and get some wins for this district. It's almost like that, what is it, that Survivor Series deal where we got to get some wins for this side of the team. This 8-6A is just struggling to get wins. And we thought it would be 9-6A that'd be struggling to get wins. And they're starting district play this week with some nice games. A nice game on Thursday, Saxby against Lakeview Centennial. Lakeview Centennial with just an incredible win last week. They converted on a 4th and like 50 and then ended up kicking the game-winning field goal. And then Saxby's another team that who do we have each week? We got to figure it out. But Red Barons usually has it figured out come district play and gets that team into the playoffs. What do you think about Saxby and Lakeview Centennial?
It's going to be a fun game. Like you said, there was a lot of resilience in what they did against Skyline last week. But Skyline played Lancaster fairly well. And I think it might have foretold what happened with the South Oak Cliff game, that Lancaster wasn't quite what they were going to be. But maybe Skyline is a little bit better than we thought. But Kendrick Sanders is a very efficient quarterback for Lakeview Centennial. I think it's really going to be the battle of quarterbacks. As you know, we got Brendan George over at Saxby. We're going to have Kendrick Sanders at Lakeview Centennial. Which of the quarterbacks can lead their team to the promised land? But for me, when I start to break it down, Lakeview Centennial just doesn't have much of a running game. Saxby has a passing game and a running game. I think Prosper humbled them a little bit after they played Coppell because Coppell is going to make everybody offensively look good this year, and I think that's just going to be what they do in that game. Then Prosper a little more, a little more well-rounded, and they were able to kind of say, okay, Saxby, this is where you're really at now. Don't think Coppell. Don't let Coppell give you that elevated boost when you play Coppell. But I think that they are going to get back on the winning column. Saxby over Lakeview Centennial in just an absolute slugfest, maybe a 28-21 back and forth, like a U.S. Open tennis game where you're just going back and your head is just going all over the place in this game. I'm very excited about this game because Lakeview Centennial has an opportunity to arrive in this game.
Yep, that's true. And there's another matchup in 9-6A that has Plano East ties. We got to get back to it. Both the teams that Plano East have beaten are playing each other. Name and Forest, we're hoping that they get their center problems figured out and they take on Rowlett. What do you think about this one?
Rowlett has consistently now to where, obviously you need 10 games or more to create a trend. But in 2 games, we've seen that they had a second half collapse and just absolutely just didn't have anything in the second half after being competitive in the first half. Naaman Forest, they obviously got blitzed by Louisville, getting down 50-0 at halftime, where their defense scored 23. Louisville's defense scored 23 of those 50 points against Naaman Forest. Naaman Forest against Plano East backups showed a little bit of offensive consistency. I just see more in Naaman Forest in their loss against Plano East than I did against Rowlett in their loss against Plano East. I think Naaman Forest is a fringe playoff team right now because we got Garland and Lakeview Centennial playing very well. And don't look now, South Garland is 2-0. And I think, South Garland is now going to get in the mix. I think North Garland may be the team that doesn't win a game in this district the way they're playing right now. They lost everybody. Their 2 best players transferred out, and they're really struggling. Whereas South Garland is playing good. They're beating bad teams, but they're winning and they're learning how to win, and that's a mindset that they have to do. So I like Naaman Forest over Rowlett, and this is kind of a de facto elimination game because if you can't win this game, find your 5 wins. You still got Wiley East, you still got Wiley, you still got Saxby, you still got a Lakeview Centennial. Where are you going to get your wins? So the loser of this game is going to be behind the 8 ball already in week 1. And it happened to Rowlett last year, and they tried to roar back.
They couldn't get back. And even if the impressive win at the end of the season didn't mean anything to them because they were already way too far behind. Moving on to 10-6A, boy, I am really intrigued by the Rockfall Prosper game. Ted will be at that game. You know what? Am I shooting any games this week? It seems because Ted's at Saxby Lakeview Centennial too. Is he at every game? How much am I paying this guy? Anyway, Ted's going to be at that one. Prosper against Rockwall. And don't look now, Ted, I'm calling you Ted now. Don't look now, Dixie, but Prosper's doing it to me again. I feel like they're not getting any impressive wins, and I'm not very hype on them. And all of a sudden, here they are 2-0. If they happen to pull off this win against Rockwall come up with some excuse while I'm not impressed by it, and all of a sudden they're in the regional final or something. Talk to me about this game, brother.
I feel the same way about them. I got Prosper people who are subtweeting me and just mad because, I'm not giving Prosper the credit. Obviously, beating Saxe the way they did, that was impressive. But again, I think that's a little bit diminished because Coppell is going to make everybody look like that this year. So now I'm diminishing the Coppell Saxe game as kind of a matchup, kind of a faux pas. And Prosper is going to look at that game against Trinity and say, we were up big. We let them back in the game. We learned from that. We're going to, full throttle a little bit more. Nathan Tinbarge is really impressing me, though. Obviously, he was able to, in week one against Euless Trinity, they looked like Euless Trinity. They ran the ball 50, 60 times for 400 yards. Last week, they kind of did a Mansfield, and they threw the ball for 300, 350 yards. So they're showing that they're able to do both behind their big offensive line, because that's the strength of their team is their offensive line. And if their players can settle behind that and do well, they're obviously going to, really thrive. And now we got Rockwall in here who just got embarrassed, and they have to be feeling very that kind of the. I heard people in Rockwall legitimately thinking we can take Duncanville this year. I mean, it got real hyped real quick in that locker room after beating Cedar Hill the way they did. And then all of a sudden Jesuit humbles them, and now they're going to be mad against Prosper. And so they're coming out very inspired. What Prosper are we going to get? What Rockwall are we going to get? One of those crazy games, and all of a sudden it's 7-3, and we don't know what's going to happen for anything anymore at the end of the day. I do think this is going to be a shootout. I think Prosper is going to win like a 42-35 kind of a game, maybe even same score against Trinity, 42-41, and they're going to go. Rockwell's going to go for two to try to get that win, get a little bit of confidence, and Prosper knocks it down. I'm just out on Rockwall because where's the defense? You give up 60 points against Jesuit. Your defense looked good against Cedar Hill, who is struggling to find their identity. Prosper is going to have probably arguably a better offense than Jesuit did. So how are you going to stop them? Because they might not have some of those skill players that Jesuit has, but their offensive line is way better than you're going to get at Jesuit. Jesuit has a well-coached offensive line. Prosper has that next level. So I don't see Rockwall stopping Prosper at all. And it may even go higher than 42-41. But if Rockwall can't stop Prosper at all, how do they win? It's got to be turnovers, special teams. Special teams, Rockwall does have an advantage because they have a really good special teams coach. They always have a trick play or two up their sleeve. They might have to get that out to win this game.
I just want to know what my problem is with Prosper. I don't get it. I probably need some sort of therapy. They open the door for this bandwagon every single year for me, and I refuse to get on the train. I'm going to get on it at some point, and maybe it'll happen after this game, because now what's my thing this year? They still, all their players are having to leave with the new school opening up. They can't possibly, and they got a new coach. They can't possibly keep doing what they're doing. And what they're doing is they keep doing what they're doing. So I just got to relax and figure this out. Talk to me about the rest of 10-6A, because it looks like we got a lot of competitors in this district.
Yeah, every week I find myself more and more impressed. I was looking at Royce City, and they have and we're not even going to talk about Royce City Melissa and break that game down.
Yeah.
Obviously, but Royce City now gets a chance to really impress themselves against Melissa. You want to talk about having a chance to get on our radar. You beat Melissa, or even play competitively against Melissa. You're going to quickly get on our radar this week. North Forney 2-0 and continue to look impressive. Rockwall Heath with a nice win over Euless Trinity this past week. Now they're going to get a Lake Ridge team that's down, so that should be a good win for them. Mesquite had their way against North Mesquite. Now they got to play Louisville. Louisville is going to probably take out some aggression on them. And Tyler Legacy, a team that I thought might make the playoffs, are looking like the least likely to make the playoffs. And now they get Longview, and that's not going to be easy for Tyler Legacy at all this week. Mesquite Horn against Tyler High is going to be a really good test for Mesquite Horn. Having to go out to Tyler and win a game out there, I think that's going to be a fun test for Mesquite Horn. But what I really look at this district is there are 6 teams that arguably are within 1 or 2 touchdowns of each other. It's going to be matchups, coaching, special teams, all those intangibles. You can't take a week off in 10-6A. You talked about touchdown Teddy. You should make him the district 10-6A guru and make him go to a district 10-6A game every week, because there's going to be 2 games guaranteed every week that are going to have playoff ramifications once district starts in a couple of weeks.
So far he is. He comes right out of work and walks across the street to Hamby to shoot Mesquite Horn last week, and week before he got a game. It's just the 5A Mesquite teams that are having them trouble to come out to see their games play. But as far as 6A is, he's out there. Let's go on to everybody likes to call the District of Doom, 11-6A. I told you how impressed I was with Mansfield last week. They're taking on South Grand Prairie. Man, they got to hope for no letdown in this one, right?
Yeah, I think, but South Grand Prairie, you look at who they've played, obviously, and this is how they started out last year. They played that very tough non-district schedule. I think Mansfield is going to make a statement against South Grand Prairie. Last time I said that, you pulled it out there and embarrassed me, and the statement was not made. But I think Mansfield, is going to beat South Grand Prairie by 2 or 3 touchdowns and really state themselves as we're closer to Duncanville and DeSoto than we are to the rest of the batch. And they got to play like that. If you can't blow out South Grand Prairie, how are you going to play Waxahachie? How are you going to play Cedar Hill? And how are you going to be competitive with Duncanville and DeSoto? So it gets back to that same style points matter. We talked about, it was like our lead story last week. But I think South Grand Prairie has shown consistently they're down. And I think South Grand Prairie had the kind of that Saxy effect that they had. And Mansfield's going to be the Prosper now, who's going to let the South Grand Prairie know, who was the Saxy the previous week, know that this is what a good team looks like when you have all good both sides of the ball and you play well on both all phases of the game. I think Mansfield wins a pretty comfortable game over South Grand Prairie.
Tell me what's going on down there at Waxahachie, because they're winning games, but they're not impressing us too much. They're not getting those style points that you like to see.
And last year they did get the style points, but Arlington Lamar, I keep going back and forth on Arlington Lamar. I mean, they got completely rolled by Keller Timber Creek. And then all of a sudden they play Waxahachie in a 1-score game that's nonstop, competitive, where one thing goes here, one thing goes there. Waxahachie's making a lot of mistakes or getting a lot of penalties, but that's starting to be a trend now. You can kind of chalk it up to NS rivalry game, first week of the year, jitters. And this might be the last 287 battle that they have now against Arlington Lamar. Obviously, they're going to be a favorite against Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie got completely blasted by Wiley East, so this is their chance to kind of get back on the board and make things right. But I think Waxahachie might not make the playoffs this year. I mean, it's getting real close with Waxahachie and Cedar Hill. I mean, I'm going back and forth on that every week. It's like they're writing their resume and I'm reading it and I'm evaluating it. But I really like that Cedar Hill is able to pound the rock right now. They pounded the rock against Arlington Martin. And I think if they can play like they played against Arlington Martin, they're going to beat Waxahachie. So Waxahachie, you got to show me something, Indians.
Yeah. How much are they going to have to beat Grand Prairie to get you some,
There's nothing they can do against Grand Prairie.
Nothing.
Nothing
that'll change you.
Because at what point? I mean, if Wiley East beats,
it only change you in the neck.
49-0. What are you going to do? Now
right.
they can make it worse. I mean, if they play Grand Prairie 14-8 or something, I might be looking at them as 6th place. I'm looking at Mansfield Lake Ridge like, okay, come on, Lake Ridge, you can go above Waxahachie. But there's nothing on the positive side they can do. They just have to avoid a negative letdown for me. But what Coach Tollison thinks about impressing me, he comes from that Denton Ryan. They don't like me at Denton Ryan, because what Denton Ryan's doing, they're avoiding games. That's what Denton Ryan's doing. They don't want to play anybody. Denton Ryan.
They're not playing games.
Play next year. They're going to play. They're not going to play non-district games at Denton Ryan next year. They're just going to play district because they have to, so they can stay healthy for that. We're going to have 5 bye weeks. They get put in the 16 district. They're going to play 5 games. Call it a day.
There you go, and then get us into the playoffs, and we'll go from there.
Go from there.
All right, I guess we're going to move on to 5A. 3-5A. I know we have we have an Azle team that you're looking for to being competitive. I got a little tidbit on Azle that really affects both me and you. They've got 4 sets of twins on that team. 4 sets. Now, I did a story when I first got here on 3 sets of twins at Weatherford, but we ain't hit 4 yet. What do you think about this Azle team, and can 8 people, 4 of them that look alike, really handle their business in 3-5A Division 1?
Man, they lost their best running back to Brock, Vance Guthrie. So seeing them beat Grapevine last week, that was one of the games I still can't figure out. I'm like, how did Azle beat Grapevine?
Yeah, how did that happen?
And then all of a sudden, Azle, we talked about Reedy and Azle, and Reedy's been one of those teams that I've been down on. I guess that they're my Prosper for you. And all of a sudden, that Reedy win against Azle, which I wasn't impressed by, maybe Azel's got something a little bit more than we thought. They finally had a chance to show it against Grapevine, beating Grapevine, which is why now Denton Ryan game, because we don't know what we're getting from Denton Ryan, because they had to have a walk-off touchdown against a very mid-range New Braunfels team. We didn't see a game against week 2, and now we're going to see this Azel Denton Ryan game. All of a sudden, I'm fascinated by that, because now we have real meaningful games where we're going to have questions answered. Can Denton Ryan beat a team that they're supposed to beat handily in an Azel, or can Azel, even in a loss, say, we're going to be competitive for that 4th spot? Justin Northwest, Burleson Centennial, we're here, we'll play you. And we have a chance to be competitive, because Burleson Centennial took a little bit of a step down, only beating Frisco by 1 last week. Denton Ryan, we don't know what we're going to get. Justin Northwest is a little bit, I put up on the trend button with Justin Northwest because they beat McKinney North this past week, but we still don't know what we're going to get Northwest. So Azel is a team I want to see how they're going to compete against Denton Ryan. So I don't know. I don't have the answer for it right now, because we just don't have enough data right now. But I think Azel has a chance to be very competitive against Denton Ryan.
Yeah, we should be worried about Ryan if they have 2 weeks to prepare for a home game against Azel and they don't win that game. That would cause me to concern about that team for sure. Moving on to 4 or 5A, boy, I shot through Midlothian and Ennis in the first half, and there really wasn't much going on. It's I don't even want to know if I want to say this, but it seems like he won't admit it, coach won't admit it, but it seems like Wesco is frustrated with not getting the ball as much as he should. He gets the ball on quick outs, and he uses speed and a bit of agility. That's how he scored his 2 touchdowns, was they were throw a little 1-yard pass, and he did it himself. But it's when I can tell a kid is frustrated is when he's not getting the ball and he overblocks on the play, meaning the whistle's blown and he's still blocking the heck out of the guy because he's just so freaking frustrated. Now, it also could come from crap talking, and that's just what happens in games. But they did get the win. They beat Ennis by a couple touchdowns. They're taking on Shoemaker now. This is the game that you had circled when we did the campfire way back in, boy, I don't even know what year was it we did the campfire. It seems like it was so long ago, but this is the game that you circled to talk to me about how competitive this thing's going to be.
Helene Shoemaker is a really good team, and we don't get much data on them because it's a Central Texas team that we're covering, but obviously they were competitive in all the games last year. This was a 1-score game last year. You look at what Shoemaker has done this year relative to their games last year. Shoemaker looks a lot better than they did last year. Midlothian, we keep saying it, they don't look as good as they did last year. Obviously, Michael Garber is getting tough yards, but when you have 27 carries, you should get 100 yards, and right. It's like Midlothian is trying to force the passing game to try to get the ball out there a little bit. And, obviously the coverage is going to go to Wesco. It's a very if I saw Midlothian and I looked at the stats and I saw Wesco 3 receptions for 210 yards and 3 touchdowns, that's really what the Midlothian offense should be looking like. When I'm seeing 7 for 74, It tells me they're pressing to get him the ball, like you mentioned. No
deep balls. And last week he had 3 to 5 inches on his defender, and I saw 2 jump balls, and that was it, and they were overthrown. But keep going.
Yeah. So what is Midlothian's identity? It's like you got a coach's son in there, which is always a little bit weird because you got to deal with the public impression of, the fact that you have a coach's son at quarterback. And now you've got Wesco in there who's frustrated and not getting the ball. This all seems like the perfect storm that Shoemaker is going to win this game and maybe even wins it a little handily, kind of like what Seguin did, maybe wins this game by 2 or 3 scores. I'm very nervous for Midlothian, and I think that this could set Midlothian down a path where 4th place, and you got 4th place, that's Aledo in the first round. You don't want to see that. And maybe not even making the playoffs. I'm very nervous about they did bounce back against Ennis, so I do give them the credit of that, but this district is very good at the top. And if you're not playing elite level football, you're not going to win those top 3 games. And then you're going to be having to hold on against Colleen Ellison, a resurgent Granbury team who, might be upset minded. It's not looking good for Midlothian right now. Now, Midlothian can completely assuage our fears with a big win over Shoemaker. I just don't see it happening.
And then, another thing we talked about at the campfire, the 2 best receivers in the state are in the same district. Man, I may have to add a third best receiver because people aren't talking as much as they should. But Taz Williams at Red Oak, 2025 guy, is an outstanding receiver, and he's getting all kinds of stars thrown his way. They take on Lake Belton, so that's a nice battle between Micah Hudson and Taz Williams and the wide receiver. Watch each wide receiver, see which one comes out on better. Red Oak gets it. Do they get them at home? I don't even know if it's a home game or not.
Oh, they are at Lake Belton on Thursday night on ESPN.
Oh, okay. ESPN game. So that's even going to be more bright lights on. Talk to me about what you think about this one.
Lake Belton has shown offensively they can score with the best of them, but defensively they're going to give up some points, and they did that against Buda Johnson last week. And obviously they're a good enough team to where, they're going to score points, but Lake Belton is going to be winning shootouts. And that's the way that they're going to win. Red Oak has a good defense. I mean, Red Oak beat Arlington Seguin 28-0. And, now we're starting to calibrate and go, okay, well, Seguin beat Midlothian by 14 and Red Oak beat Seguin by 28. It kind of, again, increases that concern with Midlothian, for me anyway, that can Midlothian even make the playoffs? I don't think Red Oak is going to be able to win a shootout against Lake Belton. Now, is Red Oak's defense good enough? That's going to be the question that they could answer in the affirmative, which I'm a little bit doubting right there. Obviously, shutting out Seguin is a heck of a statement, but Lake Belton has just got a next level offense. So I think Lake Belton is going to win a back and forth, fun game to watch on TV, like a 35-34. This game might be even still going on since it's a TV game. When I get home from Jesuit and Pierce, it may be in the fourth quarter. So we'll check it out. But I think Lake Belton will take care of Red Oak at home on national TV.
Yeah, hearing that it's ESPN is probably even more of a deal where Taz Williams is probably going to really want to show out. They'll probably see it. Man, coach, throw me about 4 or 5 plays in the first half. Let me get these people to know who I am across the country. All right, let's move on to 5A Division One. They start district play this week. It's a team you want to, and there's not too many super competitive games in this week, but the team you want to talk about is Newman Smith because they did what they were supposed to do in the non-district. They have the off week this week, but then they head right into it. And if they want to be a player in this district, they got teams they got to beat here, and you feel they can, I believe.
I'm fast. I'm a big fan of Newman Smith. I'm always enjoying when Newman Smith is playing well. Richland, again, it's hard to figure out what Richland is, because we talked about Haltom and Haltom maybe being a sneaky better team than we thought. So I think Richland and Newman Smith are probably right there fighting for the second spot. But Birdville has really disappointed me. They've gone 0-2, lost big the first week, and then lost in walk-off fashion against Garland last week. And I think that might speak well to Garland. And I know you didn't come out of that Garland McKinney North game impressed at all with Garland, and then Garland to get that win kind of lowers my expectation about Birdville. I got a little taken to task on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, Ward. In the dump, I was talking about how, and this is completely my error, and I just think it speaks to how quiet Birdville ISD is at times. But I'd mentioned that Newman Smith had made a 3-round run in the last 10 years. I don't think Birdville and Richland had, and all of a sudden here comes all the North Richland Hill saying, or all those people saying, well, Richland made it to the 4th round in 2017 and Birdville made it to the 4th round in 2018, and they lost to Aledo and Denton Ryan and in big fashion, which is probably why I didn't give much thought to it. So obviously these are teams with a little bit more pedigree than I might even give them credit for. But when you get into that Region 1 where you're playing West Texas teams and beating some bad teams out there, and then get spanked by Aledo and Denton Ryan, I forget very quickly. You made it to the 4th round but lost by 50. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think much about you after that. But I think Newman Smith is a lot closer to Richland than they were in my thoughts in the preseason. I think they've surpassed Birdville now. Obviously, everybody is a lot below Timberview in this district. But it's going to be fun, the 2, 3, 4 battles with Richland, Birdville, and Newman Smith. And now all of a sudden, W.T. White, had a nice bounce back win against Waco last week. And I think W.T. White is the only one of the bottom 5 that really have a chance to be competitive. And their resume right now against Birdville, they might beat Birdville. So Birdville may go from, sitting at that 3 spot to maybe not even making the playoffs.
Yikes. All right, let's move to 6-5A because they're starting as well. 6-5A Division 1. A lot of good games, especially on Thursday night. Lone Star takes on Reedy. Let's talk about that first. But you're talking about disappointing teams. 9 turnovers in the first 2 games for Lone Star. That's got to stop. That's got to stop if they're gonna make a push here. I already told you I'm on their run this whole week, this whole year. That's the team I'm running with in 5A Division 1. I can't run with them if they're going to make 9 turnovers. It's just putting too much trouble on their defense to do something. And Reedy, they may have had 2 unimpressive wins, but they got a heck of a game against Reedy at Toyota Stadium Thursday night.
Yeah, they can definitely get back into the mix with that. They've last week their best running back, who was their best defensive player, turned into a running back, was out of it, and he's expected to be back this week. But they lost one of their best defensive ends over this past week for the season, most likely. So Reedy is dealing with a little bit of the depth issue, and that's kind of what my concern with Reedy was what was this year going to look like, because they graduated so much. They obviously had Max Anderson and a couple of good offensive linemen that they were going to have coming back, but who was going to put the ball in the end zone for Reedy? And for Lone Star, that against Lone Star, that's going to be the question they're going to have to answer against a really good team. But what did Reedy do last year? They capitalized on turnovers, and now we have a very turnover-prone team. So that's Reedy's pathway to get back into this. But even though that they had all those turnovers in the first 2 weeks, they completely dominated Burleson, and they were they're very competitive with Texas High in a game they probably would have won without the 6 turnovers. I think Lone Star can make that statement against Reedy this week, and I think they will. But this is one of those games where Reedy has multiple pathways to stay in this game, and if Lone Star messes around, plays with their food, it would not surprise me at all, because Reedy has played these ugly games better than just about anybody in the last year and a half. And if Lone Star is going to make it ugly, that's where Reedy's going to shine. But if Lone Star comes out and puts the foot on the gas and gives us the best version of Lone Star, I think they could win this game in a statement win by 3 touchdowns.
There you go. And talking about the turnovers, they may be doing that, but Davion Gross is still doing Davion Gross things. And man, he's going to be fun to watch. I can't wait to get after the game, but that'll be my second game, because my first game is Heritage against Wakeland at the Star. Last year we had 4 teams playing for 3 spots, and 2 of them were these 2 guys. So these early games mean stuff. It's not, you can't just, like you always like to say, play with your food early on. One of these teams needs to come out with a win here, because the other one's behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I talked to some of my Brewer sources this past week, and one of the coaches over there was telling me that he was losing sleep. He was sending me a message at 4:30 after the dump saying, Diggs, we should have beat them. We were a better, we had this, we had that, we had this called back. We should have beat Wakeland. And that was a game that Wakeland got up big on. And then all of a sudden, Brewer sticks around and gets in the game. And all of a sudden Brewer is thrown to the end zone at the end of the game against this Wakeland team. And Wakeland against Grapevine, that was a little bit of a head scratcher. And now we see the Azle comparison, that maybe beating Grapevine, wasn't that big of a deal. So yes, Wakeland is 2-0, but a lot of people who are looking at Wakeland as far as the offensive line and defensive line saying, yeah, they got Brennan Meyer. They have a couple of good receivers. They have couple of good skill kids, but they don't got anybody else. They don't have the offensive line that they've had in the past. So Brennan Meyer is out there running around for his life and trying to make plays, and yeah, he can do that. And then you have Heritage, who's 2-0, but they beat 2 not really good teams. So you have one team that is finding ways to win against better teams, and you have one team that's blowing out bad teams. So it's kind of a fascinating game. I think Wakeland is still a little bit better than some of the people are giving them credit for. To me, it's a quarterback-driven league. We talk about, if you got the best quarterback on the field, you're going to win 9 times out of 10. And they got the best quarterback on the field in this game. So I think Brennan Meyer is going to find a way to lead them to a victory. But Heritage is probably better from 5 to 18, those players in the middle. So if those players play much better than Wakeland, it's going to be a close game. And it's going to be a fun game for you to shoot. I don't know which one you should go to first. It's going to be fascinating. I think which one are you going to first?
I'm going to Wakeland Heritage first, because I do have a backup plan for Lone Star in case something really good happens in the first half. Pick up highlights there. So that's where I'm going to go first. Maybe a mistake, because it's awful difficult to get into the place at Toyota Stadium. They got all kinds of different doors you got to go through and then come down through the stands. But I'm going to go to the Star first.
It's that messy security they had to put in there for Messi.
Yes, exactly.
make it hard for Pat Doney to do his job down there and for you to do your job. Different jobs, of course, because
Right.
you're relegated to the inside high school sports hat, and whereas Doney's got the MLS hat and MLB hat, NBA hat. He's having lunch with LeBron James while you're dealing with me.
Yeah, I'm getting excited. By the way, speaking of these hats, we do a Houston show too. Gave a kid one of these hats, and it showed up on ESPN last week because the kid went to the University of Houston game, and they showed him in the stands. He's wearing a hat, and I was like, all right, that's the point of giving these things out. So I get excited about that, and Pat gets excited about shaking hands with Messi. Who has the better job? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I think it's you, but I don't know if I made it clear. Wakeland by 7.
Wakeland by 7. All right. Let's move on to 7-5A because Forney has impressed everybody with the way they're stomping out teams. And they have another team on the docket that they probably will stomp out. I took a look at your stat line there. They've won 126-10, and some may say they may beat Poteet by that same score. So what do you think about what's going on with Fleener and the Jackrabbits?
Yeah, Fleener is having to get into that blowout management. And obviously this is where I say obviously a lot, Ward, and I'm so wrong so often. Maybe
you're very accurate. You're very arrogant about that. It's
partially. Speaking, Forney has done very well. I'm impressed by Forney because they kind of give me that North Crowley vibe that, they're a year behind North Crowley, I think, as far as next year might be Forney's real big year to break out and be competitive with Longview and Lancaster if they're even in the same region. They're probably going up to 6A for all we know, the way Forney is growing out there. They'll be in that district with North Forney and Rockwall. So they're probably a year away from competing with Rockwall and Rockwall Heath at that high level. But Forney is playing great football right now, and they're doing what they have to do defensively. They look great. They got the South Oak Cliff transfer. They have Aaron Flowers. Offensively, their quarterback is coming to his own. The running back is playing great football. We have a really good team with Forney. This whole district is really good because Tyler High, I think, is going to show us something in a likely loss against Mesquite Horn, but I think they'll play Mesquite Horn pretty well. Lufkin is playing a lot better football. McKinney North is kind of the left out team, and they've played good at times. So very fun district, but Forney has really caught my eye, and I think they're going to probably go 60 piece on Mesquite Poteet this week. And remember, Highland Park, or not Highland Park, but Lake Highlands played Poteet 35-7, if I remember right, that kind of a game. So Forney is going to make a big statement at Mesquite Poteet's expense, unfortunately, for Touchdown Teddy this week.
The schedule's kind of really working out for them too. They get Longview, Lancaster, and McKinney North all at home this year. They're kind of later in the year. I don't know how you feel about that. I usually like to play at least some of my competitive teams early in the year, so you don't have a false sense of what you are because you may be playing some garbage early on. But they got some teams later in the year, and they get to play them at home. I mean, they go to Tyler, but before we move on, I want to talk about Lancaster for a second because they lost to South Oak Cliff, and now they have Geyer coming to town. And if haven't got a chance to look at your rankings, but I'm assuming the trending is going downward on them. Talk to me about Lancaster and how you're feeling about them 2.5 games, half game. We haven't played the game, 2 games into the season.
When I first saw that score, I've been kind of going through some emotions with Lancaster. When I first saw that score against Skyline, only beating them 28-14, I started to feel really kind of like, well, I don't know about Lancaster. But then I pulled out the stats, and I saw how dominant Lancaster was in that game. And it was just kind of that same old Lancaster as far as not playing efficiently and effectively, but being dominant at the same time. But letting a team like Skyline hang around. I think they held Skyline to under 100 yards. So I was like, okay, Lancaster just has to get to that good performance level, and surely Sauk will bring that out of them. But instead, what we saw was Sauk play at that high performance level. Sauk looked playoff efficient this early in the season, which they have to look in these games playoff efficient, because once they get into that district play, it gets real sideways real quickly there, and then you get into blowout management, and you're looking at different things, which is really a detriment to South Oak Cliff, because when they have to play a 4th ranked team from District 5A in that first round, like we saw against Mansfield Summit, they are battle tested because that district district is really, really good, whereas South Oak Cliff hasn't played a competitive game in 2 months. And that's one of the coaching jobs that South Oak Cliff has to continually do to preach to those players. You got to be thinking about week 11 and you got to be thinking about week 12 because it comes up on us real quick. We're playing Spruce and Kimball and some of those teams, but before you know it, we're going to be playing Mansfield Summit and Lovejoy and Melissa. So Lancaster, to me, showed that they're not ready for prime time. Giving up 42 points to South Oak Cliff. Their offense was supposed to be ahead of their defense, but their offense against a good defense didn't put up the points that they needed to put up. The defense is going to give up big yardage and big points to those teams who are really good. Now we're seeing Forney putting up big numbers. So I don't like Forney's matchup against, or I don't like Lancaster's matchup against Forney. They can prove me wrong, but I think the gap has definitely decreased from Forney to Lancaster.
And that's no knock on Kawan Lacey over there. Boy, 200 yards rushing. He's doing all he can. If you saw the highlight against Sock, he should have been tackled 17 times on the one he broke for 50, 60-yard touchdown run. So he's doing his thing. It's just the two quarterback system. They're not really producing that much running or passing. So we'll see what they do. Let's move on to Division II.
No. You do not get to drop me down quite yet because I think it's very important more than ever. Because, and this is your wheelhouse, Ward. I know we joke about, we got to talk about Barber's Hill discussion every week, but the more I'm researching 8-5A, the higher I'm viewing this district. And this is very important for bi-district 7-5A against 8-5A. Because that third place team against a team like Barbers Hill in the first round, you do not want to be that third place team that's got to go play Barbers Hill. And that could be a Lancaster team. And Lancaster, if they have to go out to Barbers Hill, if they end up getting third in that district, that could be a one and done for Lancaster. And you have to be concerned about it if you're a Lancaster fan, if you're a Forney fan, because Barbers Hill is very good and Port Arthur Memorial is very good. And every week that data keeps coming in and I'm seeing that trend line increase for those teams. So that's something that as 7-5A fans, you got to keep an eye on 8-5A. And it's something I'm keeping an eye on because that district is looking even better. Kind of like I said, 7-5A is looking better. 8-5A is looking better for me each and every week too.
Yeah, those two that you said are very good. And then New Caney Porter is good. So, but they would have to come up this way. So it might be a little bit more difficult to get past a Forney or a Longview, whoever they'd end up having to play. But Barbers Hill is an experienced team. They're senior laden. So it's going to be a tough battle to go down there and play them.
Yeah, they're blowing out teams right now. They've won by an average of 30 points a game for the first 2 weeks. And crazy stuff has happened in that district where, Port Arthur Memorial, Barbers Hill. And I'm saying this as a DFW fan for our fans of the DFW podcast. Keep an eye on 8-5A because those teams are good enough to make your lives, you're thinking of Forney and, we're going to make a good run. You may not get out of the first round if things don't go well against, Lancaster and you lose that game. That's going to make it, we talk about how Midlothian, if they fall to 4, they have to play Aledo. You have to think about this as far as 8-5A context as well. Now you can move us to 5A.
I can move us
as I say good things about the Houston area.
There you go. If you're keeping an eye on 8-5A, do not keep an eye on Crosby. Sometimes DFW fans have, they look at the history of a team and they think they're going to be good forever. Crosby is not a good team, just kind of the other way around. I'm not saying Allen's not a good team and CE King should be happy about that, but this is not like beating one of the Allen teams from 3-4 years ago where you should be out there doing cartwheels and stuff. It's a very solid win at a tough place to win, but just remember who you're playing and how they're struggling as of right now. Now we're going to go to 3-5A Division II. You talked about how Grapevine has not impressed you and not impressed their own team because they're 0-2. Argyle's been the same way. They play each other. Is this a way to get back onto good graces over there, Coach Rogers, by beating a Grapevine team that's reeling and putting a win on the board?
We talked about 0-2 Allen against 0-2 Arlington Martin as maybe a disappointment bowl. This is a little bit of a disappointment bowl for me as well. I mean, Argyle I expected to go 0-2. They're a much better 0-2. Grapevine I did not expect at all. I do think Argyle is going to bounce back, and I think they might bounce back in a very statement-oriented sort of way. I think Todd Rogers may put the pedal down a little bit more if he gets up on Grapevine. I think Argyle wins this game 35-42 points, and Grapevine it's a little nervous about Grapevine now.
Goodness gracious. Who you're not nervous about Frisco Emerson? I know that much. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They play an upstart Panther Creek team at the Star. We'll have a guy out there for that one. Talk to me about what you think is going to happen in this game.
I think we're going to see, obviously, there's obviously again, I think we're going to see Emerson with a very, and it's now in my head. I'm in my own head, Ward. Panther Creek had a great win against Arlington Heights, a very dominant sort of win. Emerson, when they were scheduling this 2 years ago, it's probably thinking, okay, we got our two new schools. This will be kind of a fun game. Emerson was obviously exceeded. We have to. If
I gotta hit a button.
Do a production value thing, have Dean like count my obviously's and have like a little right corner up here. It's gonna say like 58, 59, 60.
That's your thing. Go ahead.
Frisco Emerson is a really, really, really top tier team. Panther Creek is a very good 4A team. I think they're going to be competitive within that region with Carter and with Salina, but I think Emerson wins this game by 28 to 30 points.
Okay. Well, it should be. I'm looking forward to seeing him play. Especially, I want to see Michael Hawkins in a light blue uniform there because he's got a new squad he's throwing around for. Let's talk about 4-5A Division II. You got a chance to catch that story we did with CJ Wilson last week, coaching up Poly.
I want you to talk. Tell your version of this 4-5A Division II. Other than Colleyville Heritage, who had a nice loss to Texas High, they're starting to remind me of 8-6A, where I'm mad at Fort Worth Wide. I'm mad at Arlington Heights. I'm mad at Grapevine now, and those are our playoff teams. So the rest of the district, I just don't know what to make with this. You might see a sweep. Well, you probably won't see a sweep because I think the fourth place team in 3-5A should lose to Colleyville Heritage, but I can't see 2, 3, or 4 beating Lake Dallas, Emerson, or Argyle in the first round of the playoffs. So I'm very out on 4-5A to Division II, but that doesn't mean that you won't tell a great story about 4-5A Division II, even if they throw a curveball at you at the last minute.
Yeah, no, it was a terrific story regardless of what happened with the curveball. But you see retired athletes go into coaching all the time, but they most of the time you see them at private school ranks. Jason Witten over Liberty Christian, Vernon Wells at Colleyville Covenant, with Tim Cedars over there at North Mesquite. But it's programs that are, doing something. This CJ Wilson, he's a 5-year vet. He was on the practice squad for the Cowboys, but he played for Carolina for 4 years. He wanted to go back, and his deal is he just wanted to give back. He wanted to give back to a neighborhood that needs it, that's not into the football all that much, not into the structure of football, and he wanted to go in there and try to build that thing. And then we went out and did a story, caught him at a 6 a.m. practice. The kids are they can't believe that an athlete like a professional athlete really wants to spend time and give back to his community instead of going to another place to be with all the bells and whistles of a private school. But he's there digging them around, getting them to work out. And he didn't even worry about the X's and O's until well later in his summer training. He was worried about just getting them physically fit, getting them to show up on time and be on a regiment schedule. He actually had them doing yoga too in the library. We were interviewing him like, yoga? We didn't know what yoga was. He's in there doing yoga, just proving to them that he loves his kids. He wants the kids to love back. And they were supposed to play Samuel at their school. They have a stadium at their school, or not much of a stadium, but they got bleachers and stuff at the school, and bring the community out to see it. And everybody was excited. That ended up getting nixed just because they couldn't get the security right. I don't think there's enough restrooms that were working well enough. It just couldn't get it up to code, and they might do it somewhere down the line. So that got shut down. But they did play it over at Farrington. They put a hurting on Samuel, so it was a pretty good game for us to be at. But it was just a great story, and the kids are just so amazed that they have somebody like this that's willing to come back, and he wants to be there for a while. He wants to see this thing turn into something at Fort Worth Poly, just to give kids a way to come out and find some structure and not run around the streets.
Now, is that story available on our social medias?
It will be tomorrow. It'll be up Tuesday on all the social medias. It was really good. My buddy Jeff Watkins went out and shot some great video. James Harris was the reporter on it. So it's terrific stuff. And and
you're the producer, right?
I did produce. So
you produce it.
It takes away from all the down stuff you're saying about the actual play on the field with 4-5A. Although Colleyville Heritage isn't doing terrible, they had a Texas High team come through there. So let's move on to 5-5A, shall we? You want to move on to 5-5A Division II?
Let's do it.
Summit's taking on Crowley. They're kind of reeling from the loss, the give up the lead loss to Mansfield, but they still showed some things. And Crowley really showed me something for the fourth quarter that I made it for. They started the game early on me. Dadgummit, Carlos Lynn, that thing said 7:30, not 7. Anyway, I showed up there as the fourth quarter of the game was nowhere near in doubt, but I was surprisingly amazed at the crowd that was out there. They got people believing in Crowley football, and they're coming out to play Summit now. It's going to be a very tough task. I know it's 6A taking on 5A, but Summit is in a different league right there. But it should be a pretty interesting game. What do you think?
I think it will. And Coach Lynn is you're seeing that incremental improvement every single week. Now, the first week again, or the first half against Mansfield Legacy, they got out to the big lead and then they couldn't figure out anything in the second half. So you're just sitting there with your camera, seeing a whole bunch of punting back and forth, nothing really happening. So Mansfield Summit, I think they're going to have that bounce back win. They took care of Lake Ridge, and in the first half, they were incredibly impressive against Mansfield. And I think they're going to be looking back as that is an area for improvement. We can't get, even when we get up on a team, and same thing with Crowley. Crowley is looking at it. We got up on a Mansfield team, and we gave up in the second half. Whereas Mansfield Summit's looking at, we got up on a Mansfield team in the first half, but we couldn't continue, and some fluky kicks and things happen, as it will in football. Crowley is a much improved team. I think Crowley is going to be competing for a playoff spot in that 3-6A. I still love Mansfield Summit. I think Mansfield Summit will take care of business by 21 points in this game.
A couple other interesting matchups. Seguin is going to be taking on Aubrey. They're very excited after beating Midlothian, and they got shut out last week. And Aubrey was a team that got them last year, but they're really struggling as well. And then I want you to hit on Midlothian Heritage a little bit, because I don't think we've talked about them in any of the podcasts we've done so far. And they're doing what they usually do. They're supposed to be doing. They're 2-0, and they got Waco La Vega coming up.
Yeah, Waco La Vega has been one of those teams that Midlothian Heritage is very much like Prosper. You talk about how we've been disrespectful to Prosper and they just keep reloading. Midlothian Heritage, we thought, they lost their best receiver. They lost, they've lost their coach a couple of years ago. They lost their quarterback from last year who did everything for that team. Surely they're going to drop. And they've just managed to continue to excel, going to 2-0 and having some really nice wins. I think they'll handle Waco La Vega. Seguin, I think they'll be able to bounce back with against Aubrey. Aubrey losing 42-0 to Anna last week. And, were you at the Anna Aubrey game last year? Was that?
I was not. No, that was Jerome, but that was something special.
Where are you, Ward? Do you do anything at all?
I told you, apparently I don't
be at all these places. Wasn't that your number one play of the year last year?
Yeah, it was number one play, that hook and lateral.
The Anna Aubrey miracle from Collin County. But Aubrey, this is not, we saw them lose to Sunnyvale to start out with. And then all of a sudden, Sunnyvale loses to Terrell, and then Aubrey gets completely blown out. I think Seguin will bounce back against Aubrey and make a 28-0 kind of a statement that Red Oak made at their expense last week.
Well, we move on to the 6-5A Division II. We didn't talk about DeSoto and 11-6A because we're going to talk about them here. They're playing South Oak Cliff as South Oak Cliff winds down their competitive part of the schedule until they get into district play. They beat Lancaster, which is better than last year, and then they're taking on a DeSoto team that's surprisingly got 2 weeks to prepare for them because nobody wanted to play them in week 2.
And all of a sudden, Parish Episcopal is not looking as good. They're 0-2, and they lost to a Houston Episcopal school. And now, Parish is going to be trying to find, where are we going to get a win against South Oak Cliff? I think they play China Spring this week. I mean, they're going to be struggling to get a win in that against South Oak Cliff. So South Oak Cliff, if South Oak Cliff goes 2-2 and just loses to Duncanville and DeSoto and beats Parish Episcopal and Lancaster, that's a huge success for them. I think that this is going to be interesting because the computer calibration right now has DeSoto a little bit over Duncanville, and part of that is just the data set with Duncanville playing a Florida school is not going to really register much, but DeSoto had such a dominant win over Allen that completely spikes up the computer rankings. So now we're going to get a chance to see, even though DeSoto is 2 weeks into it, we're going to see Duncanville versus South Oak Cliff, and DeSoto versus South Oak Cliff. We might see our first glimpse into Duncanville and DeSoto, how those two might play against each other. I think Duncanville is better than DeSoto, so I think that DeSoto wins this game, but not nearly as much as what Duncanville did. But obviously, every time I say that, DeSoto takes that a little bit personally and pushes the gas a little bit harder. But South Oak Cliff will not allow them to push the gas hard. I think they want to see DeSoto at their best, but I think South Oak Cliff I think DeSoto takes care of business by 2 scores in a back and forth kind of a game. But DeSoto, they're really good.
You move on to 7-5A Division II. We've already talked about North Crowley and Lovejoy at the top end, but and you talked a little bit about Melissa taking on Royce City. You know, Melissa earlier in the day is Nigel Smith's going to commit, so they're going to have that momentum off of that. I don't even know if you have momentum for a whole team that when one player commits. Our boy Kenny thinks it's definitely going to be Oklahoma. So who am I to argue with Kenny? He knows everything. So talked about a little bit more about that game, the Melissa Royce City game.
No, I think Melissa has a really good chance to be dominant against Royce City. Royce City got their ground game going a little bit, so that might compress the game. But I can't see Melissa, after scoring 50 points against Argyle, 60 points against China Spring, having any problem with Royce City's defense. I don't see Royce City's defense giving much resistance. The question will be, can Royce City minimize the possessions and go 1-for-1 with Melissa? I don't think they will, but I think they will keep it maybe a 42-14, 42-21 kind of a game. And Ward, one thing I try to do is monitor my own biases. And I caught myself in a bias, and I'm going to call myself out for a bias. And I want to get your take on my bias on this, is that we were talking about Lovejoy and North Crowley and how Lovejoy has a chance to make a statement and show that they can be competitive. Well, we didn't talk about what happens if North Crowley runs Lovejoy out of the building. We didn't even offer that as a hypothetical, but what if? And we talk about what a statement that would be. Could North Crowley be making a statement at the expense of Lovejoy if North Crowley wins this game 49-7, 49-14? Because what would Duncanville do? Well, if Duncanville played Lovejoy in a hypothetical situation, would Duncanville beat Lovejoy up? So this is a good chance for North Crowley to make that statement. What if all of a sudden you're pulling up the dump at midnight and you've gone through all these scores and you see North Crowley 49, Lovejoy 7? What would that tell you?
Yeah, that would sour on me again, and I'd just start thinking about all the stuff that you said last year and be like, oh boy, we're going to be on Lovejoy's bucket doo-doo list again because we'd sour on them real quick. I like it when you bring up those things. What would Duncanville do if they played Lovejoy? What if Duncanville do if they played Highland Park? I like you saying that because I like to dream about those games. I was, man, would there ever be a time where Duncanville would play Lovejoy at Lovejoy? That would be wild. But anyway, go ahead with what you were going to say.
And to that point, I think North Crowley would be a legitimate, because I've seen Lovejoy now. We've seen what Lovejoy has in 2 things. If for whatever reason North Crowley did do that to Lovejoy, I think we would have to immediately consider North Crowley maybe number 3 in the area, right below Duncanville and DeSoto, because that would be an incredible statement. And Lovejoy would obviously have to scratch your head. But when you play a team that much better, if they were that much more dominant than you, what can you do other than just tip your cap and say, thankfully, we're in 5A Division II, and we will not see a team that good for the rest of the year. So I think it's important to mention that. What if we're talking about a competitive game and what we see in Lovejoy? North Crowley has a really good opportunity to make a huge statement to the state at the expense of Lovejoy if they are able to do that.
All right, we got time for maybe 1 or 2 quick hitters. I want to talk about the Carter Sunnyvale game. We'll have. Surprise, surprise, Ted at that one as well. Talk to me about what you think about that game. Just talk to me, maybe not the game, but talk to me about Carter. They did their business with Kimball on Saturday, and they, of course, bombed out the Houston Yates team. Your feelings on the Carter Cowboys and what they might do this season in 4A?
We keep talking about Panther Creek made a statement against Arlington Heights. Now Carter made a statement against Kimball. Carter is really good at so many different positions. Quaylen Robinson, the quarterback for Carter went 13 for 23, 208 yards and 3 touchdowns, and ran the ball 10 times for 41 yards. Caden Landry, a top tier running back, 26 carries for 101 yards. Caden Landry also caught the ball 3 times for 63 yards. Jaden Lacey, 3 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown. Carter is looking more like the Carter of old and is playing at a very high level. They're just in a really tough district right now with Salina and Panther Creek. But I think Carter has made a statement why they're just a little bit better than Panther Creek right now. But I think that's going to be a fascinating game. Sunnyvale, I got high on them when they beat Aubrey, but all of a sudden Aubrey is looking not what they were. And then all of a sudden as well, we look at Terrell beat them up pretty bad. Terrell's obviously a much better team than Carter. I think Carter is going to win a slugfest, maybe 21-20, 21-14 defense. If Sunnyvale wins this game, I think we're going to look at things and see 2-3 turnovers, but I think Carter has a really good chance to win this game, and I think they should win this game against Sunnyvale. And maybe what some might be consider a little bit of an upset, but call it an upset if you will.
Terrell's another team we're going to need to talk about in the next couple of weeks. I think we've kind of not said much about them the first 2 weeks, so we'll wait a couple of weeks and talk. Now, Diggs, I'm going to give you – I would love you to give me your favorite small school game of the week. I know you're going to give me 3 or 4, but if you can pick out just one and tell us why, that'd be awesome.
Last week, the one that there's a couple that immediately popped in my head. The District 4-3A report was really sad to see Bells beat Whitesboro last week because Whitesboro, it's kind of showing us that they're a little bit down. They play Pottsboro this week, and Pottsboro's had a couple of head scratchers now over the last couple of weeks, playing a little bit more competitively than I thought. So I'm very interested in Whitesboro against Pottsboro. Brock against Wimberley is going to be one of the best games in the state. Wimberley has obviously, there's another obviously for you. Wimberley has played at a top level. Brock finally got that win against Wichita Falls Hershey last week. So put that game at Mary Hardin Baylor. We're going to have 2 great games in Belton on Thursday night. You got Lake Belton and ESPN, and you got Belton with Wimberley and Brock. That's going to be a fascinating game as well. I think Wimberley is a little bit better than Brock, but Brock is continuing to show that they're going to be there in December, and you're going to have your camera on your hand, hopefully filming a Brock State Championship this year.
Yep, and coming up soon is Brock and Gunter, which is one that we're definitely looking for. I think Pat's already said he's going to that one. I guess that's in 2 weeks, not this weekend, but the weekend after, Friday after. So
I'll be there too.
Is that what day is that?
It's Friday night.
Oh, Plano East is off. Okay, there we go.
That's our bye week.
You gotta get yourself ready for Flower Mound. My man, Flomo. We should do a podcast live at which stadium is it at? Murphy? No. Oh, well, we're not going to do it then. I was just going to make you come here and we'll do a live podcast. I can't be going.
We played y'all last year in Flower Mound. Y'all coming out here now.
All right.
You can't always have us out there.
Can't always have it. We're such good hosts, though. All right. Can't always have you out here. All right, Diggs, that was fun. Boy, I hope this week gives us as many great highs as we had last week, because it was. Go ahead.
And I kept you under 2 hours this week.
You did. Barely, but you did. I appreciate it. That was fun. I'll see you out there somewhere, and we'll do this again next week, buddy.
Ward, thank you for everything. I can't wait to break down and check out all the social medias for all the games y'all went to last week. The big story. Look forward to seeing everything you've got this week. You're going nowhere, of course, but the rest of your crew, you're producing, and crews are doing great things. It should be a fantastic week. Week 2 is always the week you have the crazy games. Week 3, we start to make sense out of everything and get ready for district. Of course, we have 6 districts in the area that are already in district, those 19 districts. So we finally get some answers to questions this week. So it's going to be fun. So thank you, Ward.
No problem. Thank you, man. It's going to be fun. We'll talk to you.
We'll see you down the road.